Marth, Gon, Jin. All three are characters that have appeared in fighters and made players outside of Japan collectively think one thing upon their respective debut. Who the hell is that? In Marth's case, Fire Emblem had notably been a Japan exclusive series at that point, and his popularity in Melee is cited as one of the reasons Nintendo eventually bit the bullet and started localizing that series. In Gon and Jin's case, both of the series they'd hailed from had made it to international shores, but in extremely limited capacities. Gon's manga actually got a release in the mid-90s in the UK and America, but manga hadn't really caught on in those territories yet. And while the later console ports of Cyberbots were strictly Japanese releases, the original arcade version saw an extremely limited release in Western countries. But how about a character so obscure, even the representatives for their parent company were like, wait, what? Shuma Gorath is an imposing, unfathomably powerful being. A member of the Great Old Ones, eldritch beings that have existed before time itself, Shuma Gorath is a demon that came to the Earth millions of years ago to rule. Though Shuma is said to be near omnipotent in his home dimension and weaker outside of it, he's powerful enough that when manifested elsewhere, like the main Marvel universe, it's less a matter of, okay, how do we kill this thing? And more so, how far away can we send or sail him away? Even characters like Dormammu were scared of this dude. He's virtually indestructible. By Shuma's own admittance, he's power incarnate, and his physical form serves only to contain said power. If Doctor Strange or anyone were to actually destroy him, that power would immediately transform them into Shuma Gorath instead. Shuma's size varies, but is usually proportional to how much of his power is being projected into whatever dimensions he's in. One of the first mentions of Shuma Gorath in a Marvel comic was in issue 4 of Marvel Premiere in 1972, as an unseen threat plotting to take over the Earth and having minions such as the demon Sligoth do his bidding. That said, Shuma's origins go back further, even outside of Marvel in fact. Marvel Premiere 4 sports a feature and concepts created by Robert E. Howard credit, and for good reason. Robert E. Howard is an author generally credited with creating the sword and sorcery fantasy genre. Known for his ability to instill dread and suspense in his horror-tilted fantasy writing, its notoriety was perhaps only matched by his most famous creation of all, Conan the Barbarian. Howard was a contributor to Weird Tales, a fantasy and horror pulp fiction magazine that published works from the likes of authors such as Clark Ashton Smith, and perhaps most famously, H.P. Lovecraft. Howard and Lovecraft, both huge supporters of each other's work, formed a writing collective of sorts with other like-minded creators, exchanging ideas, concepts, and implementing it into their own work. One such example being the Cthulhu mythos, which was originally meant to be more of a background element, but spiraled into something more complex and interwoven between stories. Of Howard's work, The Curse of the Golden Skull, published posthumously in 1967, nearly 3 decades after his death, is most relevant to this video. Featuring another one of Howard's creations, Call of Atlantis, Curse of the Golden Skull is a short story featuring a sorcerer slain by Call, who curses him and humanity with his final breaths, notably saying, "By the fane of the Black Gods, the tracks of the Serpent Ones, the talons of the Ape Lords, and the iron-bound books of Shuma Gorath." He curses his own bones and turns them into solid gold, so that any that would touch them would suffer a gruesome fate. In the early 1970s, Marvel would begin producing comic adaptations of Howard's stories, written primarily by Roy Thomas. Thomas notably adapted Curse of the Golden Skull as a Conan the Barbarian story, and would go on to write screenplays and other graphic novels for the character, using the mythos established in Howard's works. The first issue of the 1972 relaunch of Marvel's Journey into Mystery anthology series that previously hosted characters like Thor featured an adaptation of one of Howard's stories, Dig Me No Grave. Some names would be changed around from the original work, however. One of these would include the first instance of Shuma Gorath being name-dropped in Marvel proper. Roy Thomas also wrote for and was editor for several other Marvel books, not the least of which was Marvel Premiere, an anthology series meant to try out character and story concepts to see if readers would be receptive before giving them a proper solo book. Issue 3 began a Doctor Strange storyline that essentially functions as one huge send-up to the mythos built by Howard and Lovecraft, with Shuma Gorath as an imposing but mostly unseen threat lurking in the shadows. Shuma would officially debut in issue 10 of Marvel Premiere, where after nearly manifesting in this dimension through the mind of the Ancient One, Strange is forced to kill his master to prevent Shuma's arrival, making him the Sorcerer Supreme in the process. Shuma would go on to only sparingly be invoked in Doctor Strange-related stories for the most part, though in 1992 he'd appear in Marvel's Conan the Barbarian comic. To give you an idea of just how sparingly we're talking here, characters like Wolverine and Hulk had appeared in literally hundreds of comic issues in the time between their debut and their appearance in Marvel Superheroes. In the 23 years between Shuma's first comic book appearance and Marvel Superheroes, he'd only been in 14 comic book issues. And one of those he didn't physically appear in, only his voice came through, so it's more like 13. That's how obscure this guy was. Of course, in the early 90s, Marvel would approach Capcom to produce video games based on their characters, and we were graced with The Punisher in 1993, X-Men Children of the Atom in 1994, and Marvel Superheroes in 1995, where Shuma would appear as a playable character, and the story of how he landed on the roster is pretty funny. According to former Capcom artist Katsuya Akitomo, Shuma's inclusion was owed to Marvel Superheroes director and lead planner Takeshi Tezuka. Basically, when deciding on the roster for the game, Capcom and Marvel kept correspondence through faxes and the occasional business meetings in the US at Marvel's offices, and Marvel provided Capcom with one of the character handbooks for Capcom to go through to make their selections. By Akitomo's account, Tezuka specifically wanted a character that would stand out from the other humanoid characters on the roster and in Children of the Atom, and wanted someone quote-unquote unmistakably inhuman, and Shuma was the character that stuck out the most. According to Marvel artist Dana Moorehead, when the request to use Shuma came into the Marvel offices, the vast majority of the staff said stuff along the lines of, "Wait, who? Is that one of our characters?" By his recollection, only 3 people there were aware of who Shuma was, and only because they were hardcore Doctor Strange fans. The request was seen as so offbeat that it was okayed by Marvel with pretty much no issue. According to Akitomo, Shuma being so obscure and unknown, even by Marvel staff, afforded them a freedom developing the character that they didn't get with any other character on the roster, essentially having no oversight from Marvel in Shuma's portrayal. Kind of ironic considering Doctor Strange would go on to be the character that Marvel was most anal retentive about in Ultimate Marvel 3. And looking at his animations, his moveset, and his overall mannerisms, you can definitely tell Capcom's artists had one hell of a good time designing this dude. Though his English dialogue is consistent with his few portrayals as a being of pure chaos, his Japanese one quotes are punctuated with desu, which ended up with Japanese audiences seeing him as a cute little monster instead. One fun thing about Shuma is that being an old one, he's a multiversal being that exists in the spaces between universes, meaning there's only one of him throughout the multiverse. This uniquely makes Shuma the only character in the Marvel vs. Capcom games to be straight up the same exact character you see in the comics, instead of just a variant of them that exists in the MVC universe. Or at least, it's a projection of the actual Shuma's form anyway. I don't know about y'all, but the idea of Shuma Gorath canonically, for however little that means to him, digging around in the Marvel vs. Capcom universe and becoming a game show host is just kind of hilarious. Shuma's voiced in all pre-Marvel vs. Capcom 3 appearances by Frank Perry. Perry's filmography stretches all the way back to 1947, having done multiple roles in various TV shows and specifically anthology series, as well as, amusingly enough, an uncredited role for a character in an episode of the 1960s Spider-Man cartoon. With Shuma's history established now, let's talk about that Marvel Superheroes moveset, shall we? Shuma's kind of interesting in that I wouldn't class him as a grappler, yet you'll want to mix up between using his command grab and his life-draining throws a bunch for his offense. We all know not to judge a book by its cover, but Shuma definitely plays about as weird as he looks. His kick-based throws can uniquely heal him while damaging his opponent. Chaos Dimension is one of the most damaging supers in the game, both in terms of raw damage and follow-ups. And his forward and backdash both have additional utility, the former letting him low-profile things, and the latter being invulnerable for some of its duration. That said, his normals are a bit weird since he doesn't follow traditional Magic series rules. Mystic Smash is just about his only okay mobility tool. And the Chaos Dimension is balanced out by only having access to 1 bar of meter during any given fight. To expand on that bit about his normals, Shuma doesn't have the ability to combo lights to mediums to heavy attacks the way most other characters can. He can only chain a single punch into a kick, which understandably limits his combo routes. Before we touch on that moveset though, can we just take a sec to appreciate Shuma's animations? I can see why the devs were so pumped to include him. You'd think a giant eyeball with tentacles attached to it wouldn't work in a fighting game, but here we are. He's not who I'd say the best animated character in the series is, but he's up there. We'll talk about that character another time, since she's kind of a handful. Shuma's throws, as mentioned earlier, can drain life from the opponent, and even better, he can combo off of this in certain situations. Shuma also has 2 command normals worth noting. Pressing up and heavy punch in the air has him angle his aerial heavy punch eye blast upwards instead of downwards. Pressing down in medium kick does stone smite. Shuma turns himself to stone and crashes down to the ground. Shuma's first special move is Mystic Stare, done with a sonic boom charge motion and punch. He fires off a circular set of projectiles that hit 6 times at once if they connect, the strength and distance being determined by the strength of the punch button. Next up is Mystic Smash, done with a similar motion, but with kick instead. Shuma shapeshifts into a spiked ball and bounces towards the opponent. The speed and trajectory he travels at is determined by the strength of the kick button. The heavy version in particular can somewhat be used to anti-air, though in my experience he usually trades hits instead of cleanly anti-airing them. Completely anecdotal though. He has a command grab, Devitalization, done with a half circle back and kick. Shuma grabs the character, rising up before slamming them back down. This can be comboed into with light or used as a tick throw. Shuma only has 1 super, but it's a good one, Chaos Dimension. When Shuma activates this, he glows for a set period of time, and if you hit the opponent with anything but lights, Shuma will initiate an unblockable grab that'll deal a ton of damage. Even crazier, Shuma can actually combo off of this as soon as the move ends, giving it fantastic combo potential. Shuma's preferred Infinity Gem is the Time Gem. When active, whenever Shuma hits an opponent with an attack, they become petrified. Attacking them again unpetrifies them, and attacking them after that petrifies them again. Lucky for Shuma, he has a lot of multi-hit normals and special moves at his disposal, so he can actually set up some pretty devious combos with this. There's also a glitch you can do with this and Devitalization to timer scan people as well. Do it at your own risk though. It won't crash the game or anything, it just probably won't get you any new friends. Shuma's home stage in Marvel Superheroes is the Chaos Dimension. It should be noted that his home dimension hasn't ever really been named in the comics, and Chaos Dimension is just a term that the Capcom fighters use for this. This stage seems to be inspired by the place where Shuma battles Doctor Strange in issue 14 of the 1987 relaunch of Strange Tales, given the rocky wasteland and pink sky with the multiple moons in the background. There's all kinds of skeletons littered in the background for some kind of animal-like creatures, though none of them look native to Earth. The sky is very distinctly pinkish purplish, which really shows the alien nature of this place. There's also what looks to be some stone tablets in the background with some kind of writing. Can't make out what they're saying though. Perhaps some sort of incantation? The stage's most interesting aspect though are the walls on the sides. During fights here, if you beat your opponent against them enough, they'll break and the stage actually extends past it. And by extend, I mean the stage loops infinitely. It's a really cool effect that really drives home the bizarre nature of this place and the fact that it exists outside of what we know as reality. Both Children of the Atom and Marvel Superheroes easily have some of the best fighting game stages Capcom's ever designed, and it's features like this that cements that. Shuma's stage theme was composed by Yuki Iwai, who also did Psylocke, Wolverine, Magneto, Hulk, and Thanos' themes in the game as well. I think Shuma's theme in particular is the most unique one in the game. It's kind of funky and off-kilter, but that kind of works because, I mean, look at him. There's one Shuma theme I like a little more than this, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Here are Shuma's colors. So, probably time to address the elephant in the room. Why the hell is Shuma's default pink here? It's more than likely due to Capcom basing Shuma's visual design off of his very first appearance in Marvel Premiere 10, where he sports similar colors. This is also supported by the character logo used for him in Marvel Superheroes, which is taken from this panel in the same story, which as far as I know is the only time it's ever been used. From Shuma's second story onwards, however, he'd have the green coloring and pink iris we all know today. So yeah, both color 1 and 2 are canon. Who knew? Here's Shuma Gorath's ending.
With the flesh.
Shuma next appears as a playable character in Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, though he did cameo in X-Men vs. Street Fighter. He's one of the characters shown to be captured by Apocalypse, and I'm just gonna assume Shuma was bored and let it happen. And he also appears in Storm's ending in the game as well. In Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, his default color is green now, and is the case for every game moving forward, though his pink color remains his player 2 color for the rest of the series as well. His theme is a remix of his stage theme from Marvel Superheroes, arranged by the original theme's composer Yuki Iwai, and in my honest opinion is one of the game's standout tracks. At this point, Capcom's composers were just flexing that cue sound like it was no big deal. That breakdown seg into the bridge of the song is just too damn good. Of all his themes, I think this one is my absolute favorite, but I think all of his themes go hard in their own ways. Shuma gets some tweaks going into this entry. He gets a new install super that we'll talk about in a bit. Chaos Dimension is just as good as it's ever been. And Mystic Stare gets an interesting buff that adds, even if minimally, to Shuma's pressure game. That said, Chaos Dimension now takes 3 whole bars of super meter. His mobility is still awful, and his overall damage is still on the lower end of things. Mystic Stare now lingers for a bit on the opponent on hit. After a few seconds, denoted by rapid blinking, the eyes detonate. This is pretty good to throw in ground combos to continuously pressure the opponent. More interestingly, Shuma gets a new super, Mystic Split. Shuma, well, splits himself in 2, and the double performs every action Shuma does. Think Zero Sogenmu in later games, but with a bigger delay on the clone's action. This can lead to some pretty nutty pressure overall, which is great since Shuma kind of needs a threat like that in neutral. Shuma's assist is Mystic Smash. Here are Shuma's colors in the arcade version. And here are his extra colors in the PS1 and Sega Saturn ports of the game. Here's his ending. And this isn't his ending, but I'd be crazy not to mention his cameo in Dhalsim's ending, which is probably my single favorite ending in the entire series. After sitting out Marvel 1, Shuma returns for Marvel 2. Shuma's generally not that great in Marvel 2, but there are a few things to note. He gets a new super that works great for DHCs, though he loses Mystic Split. Said super also enables some unblockables. Unfortunately, Shuma's assists aren't all that great. The same goes for his damage. His mobility, say it with me, still sucks. And as a result of that, he's easy prey for lockdown-oriented teams. Shuma's new hyper combo replacing Mystic Split is Hyper Mystic Smash, done with a quarter circle forward and 2 kicks. This one's, as the name implies, a powered up version of Mystic Smash. I suspect this was given to him since he otherwise doesn't have a hyper combo that synergizes well with DHCs or crossover combinations. Shuma's first assist is Mystic Stare. His second assist is Mystic Smash. His third assist is Mystic Stare again, the only difference being that his variable counter is now Mystic Smash instead of Mystic Stare. Here are all of Shuma's colors. So this is probably going to be one of the trickier comic recommendations because Shuma hasn't really appeared in a lot. His introduction story in issues 3 through 10 of Marvel Premiere is a good place to start, as it establishes him and his visual design in the Marvel Universe proper. The 1987 relaunch of Strange Tales Volume 2, issues 13 and 14 have a short story depicting Strange fighting Shuma Gorath, which as mentioned earlier seems like what Capcom drew upon for inspiration for his Marvel superhero stage. While Shuma doesn't physically appear in it, his existence forms the basis for the conflict in the Thanos Imperative, a cosmic Marvel event starring the likes of Nova and Star-Lord that caps off the cosmic epic that began with Annihilation. Marvel's original Conan the Barbarian series also had Shuma Gorath show up in issue 260 as well, though he features a way more grotesque design there. That said, Conan's adventures are still considered canon by Marvel, even in instances where they can't name drop him due to licensing issues. This one is pretty hard to track down though, so it's hard to recommend. But if you do manage to find it, this also displays the ironbound books relating to Shuma as well. That said, my eventual recommendation is also Conan related and comes from a time a few years back where Marvel reacquired the license for him and doubled down on cementing Conan and his past adventures as a part of the Marvel Universe. This video's comic book recommendation is Gerry Duggan's run on Savage Avengers. Savage Avengers kicks off with Conan being thrown into the present day, ending up in the Savage Land. He encounters Wolverine, and after a brief scuffle, cooler heads prevail and they realize they aren't enemies. They join forces and end up being joined by the likes of Elektra, Doctor Strange, and even Doctor Doom, to name a few, in search of Quoggoth, a dark sorcerer and enemy of Conan, who also appeared in his older stories and eventually transitioned into being a Marvel villain, notably having encountered the X-Men a few times. As it turns out, Quoggoth is holding Brother Voodoo hostage, and the Avengers engage Goth and rescue Voodoo, only to find him possessed by none other than Shuma Gorath. Quoggoth's plan is essentially to summon Shuma into this dimension, so that he can literally consume him and gain all of his power for himself. Gross. Being that Shuma is older than time itself, and Conan and Goth are from the past, the story jumps around between the past and present a bit, even calling back to some of Shuma's earlier appearances, like in Conan 260. It turns into a race against time to track down Quoggoth before he can fully summon Shuma into this dimension. Though, things get more complicated when he starts using other people as mediums to invoke Shuma through. Shuma himself admittedly doesn't have too much agency in this story. Hell, he even kind of becomes a victim halfway through. But I recommend reading it anyway because it's probably the story that ties together Shuma, Conan, Doctor Strange, and Robert E. Howard's original stories, as well as Roy Thomas's adaptation of them together. And when Shuma finally does show up in full, well, you have to read that for yourself. I'm recommending the full run of this here primarily because it lays out the context for Quoggoth and Conan pretty heavily throughout that run, and though Shuma is only in a few issues, his influence is felt throughout the story. Savage Avengers is also one of the more fun Avengers rosters in recent memory, so if you like seeing characters you normally wouldn't see with each other on a team book, this might be up your alley. Shuma returned for Marvel vs. Capcom 3, being the game's DLC character alongside Jill Valentine, making them, at least to my knowledge, the first DLC characters for a Capcom fighting game. Shuma's arguably the most surprising returning veteran for the Marvel side, and in what's probably Marvel 3's most well-known development story, he almost didn't happen. Apparently, when the game was first greenlit and roster deliberations began, the first Marvel character Capcom proposed wasn't Spider-Man, it wasn't Iron Man, it wasn't even Cap. It was Shuma Gorath. Marvel pretty much immediately shot them down, but the development team put their foot down and insisted, citing him as an important piece of series history. Even with some of the other series veterans we know Marvel shot down like Cyclops and Venom, Capcom adamantly kept presenting their case for Shuma, and Marvel eventually relented, but under one condition. that he not be on the base roster, but DLC instead, which Capcom of course complied with. He's voiced in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 by Paul Dobson, who also notably voices Dr. Doom in the same game as well. He's also done voice acting for NPCs in Dead Rising 2, but it seems like a lot of his voice acting credits are for the LEGO Ninjago series, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot. And I mean, hey, look, you've seen grocery prices lately? Get that bag by whatever means necessary, my guy. Shuma's theme is an arrangement of his Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter theme. I really appreciate that they kept the kinda spacey, funky angle for the song. It still sounds unique compared to a lot of other songs in the soundtrack, and I love it. Shuma actually gets some meaningful additions in Marvel 3 compared to previous games. He has a great self-OTG tool in Mystic Ray. Mystic Ray itself is a great full-screen assist, one of the best in the game. He's fantastic at pressuring in the corner, and while it's not all that great, he has an air dash now, and that's something. Unfortunately, his projectile game is limited to the ground. His most useful attacks are charge motions, making him somewhat technical, and outside of the corner, he has a hard time getting offense started. Despite the vast majority of Shuma's moveset remaining the same, he fares better in this game than he does in Marvel 2. Shuma's old Fierce Punch now has a name and is a command normal, Strange Gaze.
Oops. Oops.
Like in previous games, he can also angle it upwards as well. Mystic Smash has changed from a charge motion to a fireball motion. As always, the attack strength dictates the power and angle. Mystic Stare is largely the same both property and input wise.
Cool. Mystic Stare. Cool.
Shuma's most interesting new tool is Mystic Ray, done with a flash kick charge motion.
Mystic Ray. Cool.
This is a thin full screen beam that Shuma fires at an angle, starting downwards and finishing upwards. This notably hits OTG for solo super confirms, and is also great for sniping out assists. Shuma retains devitalization too, still done with a half circle back motion. Hyper Mystic Smash returns and is largely the same.
Wonderful.
It also notably OTGs. Hyper Mystic Ray is Shuma's new super, done with a half circle back and 2 attacks.
Dude. Mystic Ray. Dude.
Shuma fires 2 large Mystic Rays before opposing. This is best used as a combo ender, as Shuma is pretty vulnerable when he poses at the end. Shuma's level 3 is, as you'd expect, Chaos Dimension. It works about the same way it does in previous games, and similar to those games, Shuma can also attack the opponent afterwards. Shuma's first assist is Mystic Ray.
Yes.
This is generally considered to be Shuma's best and most versatile assist. Shuma's second assist is Mystic Stare. His third assist is Mystic Smash. Here are all of Shuma's colors. Shuma's alternate costume is from a character that somehow has even less overall appearances than Shuma himself, Quoggoth. Quoggoth was created by Shuma to be one of his servants. Quoggoth eventually rebelled though, and Shuma, being unable to actually destroy him, instead sealed him away. He's discovered by the X-Men way later, but ends up getting sealed again. As of Ultimate Marvel 3's original release, that was literally his only appearance in comics. And as of today, he's only been in one other comic, having been in an issue of Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. Here are all of Shuma's character interactions.
You could not hope to defeat me, Hellspawn!
Ancient One, what is that?
It's do or die. I will come for your dimension next! I assure you, Demon Hunter, you have never faced my might before!
Judgment is upon you, scum.
Live and let die! The power of hell is of no concern to the Lord of Chaos! You govern, but without any real power!
Doesn't look like an arm lock's gonna work on you. Whoa!
Get ready to brawl! You are no Doctor Strange, mortal! A living corpse! How quaint!
Whoa, I don't even want to touch that.
Get ready to brawl! Your weapons are impressive. Your skills are not! What a handsome devil you are! What a handsome devil you are! Get ready to brawl! An eye for an eye! I'll eviscerate you, half-breed!
No one will stand in my way.
Live and let... You are an embarrassment to demons everywhere! Gorath!
And here's Shuma's ending. Shuma is the one Marvel character that it's safe to say people know almost solely because of Marvel vs. Capcom instead of the comics itself. And there's something kinda beautiful about that, you know? He's a testament to the creativity of the original Marvel superheroes development team, and also the trust imparted by Marvel onto Capcom that they do something neat with the character. That said, given the Conan connection, that's actually occasionally kept Shuma out of some things. Perhaps the most high-profile example is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Since Shuma is technically a Conan character, that meant having to get the film license for that to use him. Instead, Marvel Studios took what was obviously Shuma and just renamed him to the similar but not the same Gargantos instead. If another Marvel vs. Capcom game ever happens, you think he'll get in? I don't have any clue, but stranger things have happened. That's going to do it for this video. As always, thanks for watching, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.